Public just has a sense of awareness, probably more so than in the United States, and I think that's probably where we need to start heading.
And we spoke to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a former Israeli elite forces commando, about combating terrorism.
The way you fight terrorism is you fight the terrorists. You don't say, I can't do anything because I have to defeat their ideas. Yeah, you will defeat their ideas, but first defeat them. You know, you didn't say, I'll fight the Nazis by first defeating their ideas. First you defeated them. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't have these forces of radicalism reappearing in Europe or anywhere else. Of course you can. But you have to keep weeding out these weeds. If you don't weed them out, they'll overtake your garden.
Israel's critics accuse the nation of abusive tactics, but most Israelis say they recognize you have to strike a balance between security and civil liberties, and oftentimes security wins out. Some believe the next president may want to heed Netanyahu's advice. Rick Leventhal, Fox News.
When asked in our latest Fox News poll, Americans are split on whom they trust to do a better job on terrorism. Hillary Clinton has a 1-point advantage in this poll, but that is obviously within the margin of error. The clock is ticking as the bill that would allow the victims of 9/11 and their families, the families of the victims of 9/11, to sue the government of Saudi Arabia for possibly supporting terrorism is really gathering dust on President Obama's desk. It overwhelmingly passed the House and the Senate. Last week, White House officials made the president's stance pretty clear.
The president's going to veto it. I don't want to leave you with the impression that somehow the decision is up in the air. But the president will veto it within the next 10 days.
But nothing has been done yet. Senior Capitol Hill producer Chad Pergram is here to explain what's taking so long. Good evening, Chad.
Good evening. It's an issue of the calendar. Per the Constitution, Article 1, Section 7, the president has 10 days, Sundays excluded, to veto a bill. If he doesn't, then it automatically becomes law. If he does send it back, Congress doesn't have a clock during the time that they can try to override it. It takes a 2/3 vote to try to override a veto in both bodies of Congress. What President Obama is really trying to do here is maximize the time. Congress is trying to finish this interim spending bill, maybe include some Zika funding, and maybe get out sometime in the next week or so. So Thursday the 22nd is the key. That's what we're watching here in terms of the timeline.
Yeah, Chad, do they have the votes for an override? It seems like both houses, or the House and the Senate, passed with overwhelming numbers.
Yeah, those were overwhelming numbers because there was no recorded tally. In other words, there was no opposition. I want to put a fine point on this, though. In the Senate, it was done by unanimous consent, meaning nobody objected to them doing this. In the Senate, it was a voice vote, so there was no recorded tally. Per the Constitution, you have to have a recorded tally to try to do a veto override here. And that's going to be a big challenge because there are a lot of members of Congress who are for this bill, but there are some who don't want to be on the record against this. And what President Obama might do is try to postpone that veto override when there is a recorded vote on that until after the election.
And you can tell we're 51 days away from that election. Chad Pergram up on Capitol Hill. Chad, as always, thank you.
My pleasure.
Hacking has been a significant part of this presidential election, with emails from former Secretary of State Colin Powell and the Democratic National Committee being released and talked about. But could a hacker actually change your vote? Federal officials are adamant that that would be nearly impossible. But is that correct? Senior correspondent Eric Shawn investigates.
Can a machine be hacked? I have demonstrated how to hack the ABC Advantage voting machines that we use in New Jersey.
He is the bane of election officials because Princeton University professor Andrew Appel says a touchscreen voting machine, the type used in about 10 states, can be tampered with.
I unlock the back door.
In 2008, he demonstrated how, as part of an election lawsuit against New Jersey officials. While he notes there has been no documented case of a machine actually being hacked this way in a U.S. election, he says it could happen by simply swapping the machine's computer chip for his own.
And I'll just have to replace this one ROM chip with a fraudulent computer program.
He was able to change the votes the machine counted.
I figured out how to make a slightly different computer program that just before the close of the polls, it shifts some votes around from one candidate to another. And I wrote that computer program onto a memory chip like this. And now to hack a voting machine, you have to get 7 minutes alone with it with a screwdriver.
Our experience here in this office we all concur that we have not seen one documented case in machine being compromised.
John Brzezowski, the Deputy Superintendent of Elections in Hudson County, New Jersey, insists in real life it cannot be done. He points to multiple redundant safeguards that protect machines. They are locked in secure areas under camera surveillance, and broken security tape on vital parts would show any violation.
I don't know how you could possibly do that to 500 machines and get the secrecy and the time to do so. I don't believe that's possible.
But the professor insists it is.
The good news is it's not something you can easily do from Russia.
But the bad news?
But the bad news is that it really is possible to do locally.
Well, the voting machine company Dominion told us the demonstration is not a realistic assessment, not a credible test, they say, because it was not an actual election. But Professor Appel says he's exposed to weakness, and it shows we should vote on machines with paper ballots for proof. By the way, here's the chip. It costs $4. Brett?
Amazing. Eric, thanks. We'll continue your reports next week. Next up, an expanded all-star panel joins me to talk about Homeland